Ann Swanson teaches meditation to busy people with busy minds. She is the author of the best-selling book Science of Yoga, which has been translated into over 15 languages. Her new book, Meditation for the Real World, illuminates the fascinating science behind meditation with step-by-step practices to find peace in everyday life. What a fascinating subject, Anne. You collaborated with a Harvard researcher on the science of meditation. What does science tell us about what happens to the body and the mind when you meditate?
We were going to write this book as Science of Meditation as part of this series, but we decided to go with meditation for the real world because I wanted to actually have practical practices for people to do. And I incorporated a lot of science because that's how I am. And I teamed with Dr. Sarah Lazar. She's a Harvard neuroscientist who does some of the most fascinating research in the field. She puts people who are advanced meditators all the way to absolute beginners into these fancy fMRI scanners and looks at their brains. So when we peer into the brains of people who meditate, versus people who don't, we find that people in their 50s, people older who have meditated for many years, tend to have larger brains. They have critical brain areas that are bigger than people that are in their mid 20s. So the areas having to do with focus, memory, cognition, emotional regulation, these areas of the brain seem to be preserved or even built up through meditation. And then we see this also with a short-term practice, like 8 weeks. Practice meditation just for a couple months, and we start to see physical changes in the brain. Now, immediately, though, your brain changes too. Immediately when you meditate, you release endorphins, feel-good chemicals, pain relief chemicals. Your biochemistry changes, your neurochemistry changes, which affects how you feel, your mental health. Just like getting that runner's high when we go on a run, we can get those same sort of chemicals when we meditate and when we get into flow and relieve a little bit of stress from meditation. But it's not just the brain. I could go on about every system of the body, but I'll just get you started with that.
Well, does the research tell us anything about how many years, how many hours you have to meditate to feel that difference?
Well, like I said, shorter studies of usually typical research studies are around 8 weeks, but some of them have been shorter. They show changes. Significant, statistically significant changes. So you don't have to meditate like a monk for a decade to see these changes. Now, 5 minutes of meditation studies show immediate changes. 5 minutes of compassion meditation, and the participants reduced their cortisol, their stress hormone, and they reduced their secretory immunoglobulin A, fancy word for SIGA, let's just call it SIGA. And this is an antibody, it's in your immune system, and it basically represents how well you can fight invaders. And that goes up, which we want to see, by multiple times just from a 5 minute meditation. And it lasted for hours all through the day. That immune response that helps you be able to fight diseases that are coming your way. Those participants also said that they felt more energized from meditating for the whole day. So short meditations, as short as 3 minutes, have been coming out in the research recently with profound immediate effects too. Even 1 minute meditations can make a difference. You can feel the difference, and I'm sure we'll do one today, fit into
Mm,
this
mm.
session.
Yeah, what does it tell us about how global diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia?
One of the biggest mechanisms in which meditation can help is reducing inflammation. When we can manage our stress better and have better perspective, be less, it's kind of like you get through the day distracted by your thoughts, but also so involved in your thoughts that you start believing all of your thoughts. So if we can become less reactive and obsessed with our thoughts, if that makes sense, kind of stepping back and becoming an observer of the thoughts, then we are not controlled by them. We're not believing all that negative thinking. I mean, humans have a natural negativity bias for a reason. And when you aren't consumed by negative thoughts, constant thoughts, when you are more present, then your inflammation goes down and your cells work better. We see this on a cellular level too, that your cells function better when you are more present and you're happier. So when we reduce inflammation, it affects all diseases. I mean, we have really come to the point where we think inflammation may be the root of most of these chronic diseases, if not all of them. So if you can reduce inflammation and the stress burden, then you are reducing your risk for all of them. And we think, oh, well, my mom had Alzheimer's, so I'm going to get it. Or my dad had heart disease, so I'm going to get it. We used to think genetics were such a big component. And they're actually only a really small component. Some research suggests, like twin studies show that it's like maybe 7%, and the other 93% is your lifestyle, your choices, how you think, how you feel, your exercise, the food you eat, the company you keep. That makes a bigger impact about whether you're going to get these diseases than your genes. So your genes are not your destiny.
Obviously, meditation is closely connected to breathing. And you just mentioned cortisol levels going down, your stress hormones going down. If you breathe in a relaxed state, your cells are fed with more oxygen. What does research tell us about that?
Well, breathing has immediate physiological effects. It's pretty amazing. By changing our breath, we have access to a part of our nervous system that we don't typically have access to. That's your autonomic nervous system. It's usually automatic, right? It's your digestion. Right now, you can't be like, okay, digest and stop digesting. It's your liver functioning. You can't be like, liver, stop functioning right now and start. These things are all automatic. The hormone release. This is all the part of that autonomic system. Now, our breath can either be automatic, right? It's through the day, we don't have to think about breathing, and through the night, we don't have to tell ourselves to breathe, or we can bring conscious control into it. And when we consciously control our breath, for example, as you're listening to this, slow your breath down. Just simply slow the breath down. When you start to breathe slower, you focus better. That's what research has shown us. And your heart rate is going to begin to lower. Your blood pressure will also begin to lower. And I'd like you now to begin to make those exhales longer than the inhales. So really try to let more of the breath out with the exhales and make the inhale more subtle. So nice long exhales, breathing in and out through the nose, which is our natural filtration system. So whenever possible, nose breathing. This elongated exhale is also going to further help you to go into that rest and digest and rejuvenate part of your nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system state. It's part of that autonomic system. But we can actually bring ourselves there through slow breaths with an elongated exhale. And I do these all the time. Nobody even needs to know you're doing them. You can do them while you're listening to somebody, while you're waiting in line, and you'll feel immediate effects.
Now, there's very different types of meditation. The typical Zen meditation, you sit on a cushion and you focus your mind on nothing. And then you have the mantra meditations, you have walking meditations. What type of meditation do you recommend?
Well, it depends on the situation. I'm a yoga therapist, so I adapt therapeutically for each individual with their health conditions and each situation. If you're anxious, it's going to be a different meditation than if you're depressed. If you're grieving the loss of a loved one, it's going to be different than focusing before going on stage, right? And that's why in meditation for the real world, I put 83 meditations for a variety of circumstances. Probably anything you can name, there's a meditation for it. There's a meditation for FOMO. There's a meditation for feeling overwhelmed from doom scrolling, from for you to do right before you do a work project so that you can focus more, for enhancing your memory, like you mentioned, dementia. There actually has been some research on using specific meditation techniques to help with memory and to help with dementia. So there's meditation for everything, really. You don't just do the same meditation all the time unless that's what works for you. But for most of us, it doesn't. I've had some experiences where I did a type of meditation where it actually didn't work. It made it worse. I felt more anxious, you know? And so if you've ever felt that way, if you've ever done a meditation technique where it didn't work for you, you didn't feel right, you might just be doing the wrong meditation technique for you in
Mm.
that circumstance.
Well, I tried Zen and I had great difficulty sitting for such long periods. I spent
Yeah.
a week doing in a Zen monastery type setting, and I had real back pain and pain
Yeah.
all over my body. And then I went into walking meditations, which is my favorite, of course. I do Tai Chi, and from that it expanded into walking meditations. Uh,
Yes.
which is my field, of course. And I'd like to talk a bit about your opinion on that.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I love how you gave that example because I think some people feel so frustrated. They're like, I tried meditation and it made my back pain worse, or it made me feel more anxious because it just wasn't the right one for them. And that's why I really wanted to create a book that was so many different types so you can find the right one for you. And I have Tai Chi in here too. I also am a Tai Chi teacher. I study Tai Chi in China, and I'm working on some projects with Tai Chi right now. But one of my favorite sections is the walking meditation section of the book, because some people, you know, especially when you are particularly anxious or you've been sitting all day, you don't want to sit longer. It's nice to get outside. And the benefits of nature, we should also talk about because I have a whole section on that. And I know you know that too. So, like, let's talk about the scientific benefits of nature. But you need to get outside and walk. And when you walk with a specific intention. It's not just, you know, mindlessly walking, you're mindfully walking, you're being present. And there's a variety of intentions you can set as you're walking. So, when you're in nature, first taking in your five senses, you know, and really being immersed in the moment. That's one way of approaching the meditation. I have a bunch of techniques here that one is my favorite, that Thich Nhat Hanh, he suggests that when you're doing a walking meditation with each step, imagine you're the happiest person on earth. Each step, feel what would it be like to be the happiest person on earth? And then you just start to feel gratitude and light and open and present because that's how the happiest person in the world would feel. And then you're like, oh, wait, I am the happiest person on earth right now, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
instead of faking it
yeah.
till you make it, you fake it till you become it. You're like, oh, that's what it does feel like. And when we practice these emotions, they become more a reality through our day. So, walking meditation is one of my favorites. I do it every day, especially after meals, because we see the benefits of reducing your blood sugar spike after you eat. Just a 10-minute walk is usually what's recommended, but there's been research that shows 2-minute walk makes a difference. 2 minutes of walking. And the reason being is that after you eat, you have all the sugars, the glucose in your bloodstream floating around. And that's even if you didn't have any sugar, it's in your starches, your carbs, it's sugars in your food, right? Your body processes them the same way and they're floating through your bloodstream. And when you walk, you're using the biggest muscles of your body, your thighs, your gluteals, and they love the sugar. They will take the sugar first as immediate energy. So now it's not circulating in your blood as much. Well, guess what? When we don't have as high of a blood sugar spike, we have less inflammation. And as we just said, reducing inflammation could be key to preventing or lessening the likelihood of so many chronic diseases or even helping you get over them.
That is fascinating. I've gone delved much into this topic and found that there was one article on how the Greek philosophers, especially Aristotle, taught his students while walking.
Mm,
And Bach did most of his best compositions while walking. So
mm,
walking meditations, he would recite the tunes and adapt them and readapt them while walking. Charles Dickens, some of the greatest poets, did their most creative walks uh, whilst or had their most creative thoughts while walking. And I think
yes.
I think there's such a close connection to meditation and what I call deep walking, not just
Yes.
mindless walking, but deep walking.
And one thing about walking just naturally, especially in nature. So as you teach, it's better to do it in nature, but if anywhere, even in a city, you're going to focus on the sounds of the birds, the clouds in the sky. It's still going to be very beneficial. But when you're walking, your eyes naturally scan left to right. And they're scanning the environment, and we're used to that kind of input of like, oh, tree, bird, sun, right? There's maybe a little hut or something, we're used to that slow input, and your mind feels relaxed processing it and seeing it, scanning for threats. But there aren't any threats when you're walking on a path, hopefully, and somewhere safe. So you're feeling at ease. This side to side activity of the eyes, it turns down amygdala activity. Now, amygdala is the fear center of your brain. And when we can turn that down, we're going to feel more safe and at ease. Similar to like some different therapies that therapists do where they move their fingers side to side and you follow it with your eyes, EMDR. And that's helping to have your brain process and change the network activity. Same thing naturally happens when we walk. So just getting up and moving has so many benefits to your health, including helping you feel more safe and less fearful compared to what we've probably been doing most of the day, which is staring at a screen.
Mm.
And our brains are not used to that context change, which is like, think about social media. It's like, oh, there's a war on the other side of the world, and then you see your ex just got married and had a baby, and then you see your friends didn't invite you to a party, and it's one thing after another. It's a very fast context change. It's so much to process. That's not what our brain is used to as far as pacing. So a walk is more the type of pacing that is good for our nervous system.
Wow, that's so interesting. Because what I noticed is when I go on a 3 week or 4 week pilgrimage hike, is that the first few days are more detoxing, also detoxing the mind from toxic emotions. And
Mhm.
then what I'd notice is that nature would come closer. I'd have a bird following me, or a
Oh,
cat,
yeah.
or a dog, or a deer would come real close. I found that,
You feel in connection with them. And I
yeah.
often encourage people to, meditate with your pet. Let your pet sit on your lap or near you. They'll feel the energy. They'll react too in your household. But you're creating like better vibes. It sounds woo-woo and hippy-dippy, but we've all experienced it that if when you have a relaxed energy, others are relaxed around you. It's something called co-regulation. This is when our nervous systems align. So it happens in our family, in our house, when somebody's really anxious, everybody starts to feel anxious and vice versa. And so same thing I think is happening with the animals. I mean, we see it with our pets. So why wouldn't it be with the deer and the birds too? They're feeling that co-regulation with you and they're feeling connected and wanting to get closer to you.
Yes, this is what I noticed from some of the great Buddhist teachers, the Dalai Lama. I attended a seminar with him in Hamburg, Germany, some years ago, and as he came into the room, the energy changed. It was like almost immediate. There's
Yes.
just this aura of complete peace that he emanated.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I saw him speak at his monastery in Dharamsala, India, where I studied yoga, and he's so light and joyful. That's what I love about the Tibetan vibe. It's like I studied Tibetan Buddhism in school too, and like it's just so silly and smiley and joyful, and it's this playful kind of peace that they embody compared to the more serious Zen monks, like you described earlier. It's so serious. It's not my style.
Exactly, yes. Now, for our listeners who are battling with the monkey mind, the busy mind,
Yes.
and the mind controlling everything, how do you get from you controlling the mind instead of the mind controlling you?
Well, I wouldn't think of it as you controlling the mind, but instead you're befriending the mind. You're accepting and being present with it. If you try to control it, it's going to also be a losing battle. So let's drop the control and come to a place of observing. And first thing to know about meditation is it's not what people think. It is not just stopping your thoughts and focusing on the one thing. So typically meditation is it's focusing in a relaxed way, a general definition. So you're focusing on something. It could be a mantra, a word that you repeat. It could be your breath. It could be your five senses as you're doing a walk. It could be a variety of things. Whatever your teacher tells you to focus on, you're focusing on it. So people think that's the meditation because that's the instruction they got. But based off of research and the philosophy and just what meditation truly is for both beginners and advanced monks, there's a process. What's happened first is you're going to have that focal point. Then, you may only sustain it for a couple seconds and maybe a minute. That's really great, but it may only be a couple seconds. The next step of this cycle is your mind will wander. It's inevitable. It's human nature. Research shows that our minds wander over 47% of our waking hours. Our minds are just a wandering mind. They're constantly scanning for threats. So you're going to think about, what am I going to eat later today? Right? Where's my next meal coming from? You start evaluating that, or you're going to think about like, is what I said 10 years ago, was that okay? Are they still mad at me? The craziest things will pop in your mind. So your mind will wander to something. Remember, your brain's just trying to protect you. It's scanning for threats. Now, the next thing is the important step is that your brain activity will change in meditation to start to notice, was that important? A specific network picks up that determines, is this important information? Okay, is what I said 10 years ago important right now? No, I'm supposed to be focusing on my breath. Is the smell of smoke important right now? Seems there's a fire in the house. Yes, that's important. Stop meditation, abort mission. Let's get out of here, right? So you're going to determine, is this important or not? And that's an important step. The next step is redirecting it back to the focal point if it's not important. And that requires a specific network activity to go back to that focal point. And we're strengthening those networks in those areas of the brain, the activity there to help us be able to focus better. So if you feel like I don't focus well enough, my mind wanders too much, I have a monkey mind, guess what? More reason to meditate. Meditation is boot camp for your focus. You're training your focus so that in meditation you can be better at focusing on the one thing. You will get better. You'll expand from 2 seconds to 5 seconds of focusing on that thing before the mind wanders. And also in everyday life, you'll be able to focus on your task at work. You'll be able to focus on playing with your kids. You'll be able to focus on the things that are important to you with a greater sense of purpose.
That is so important because I saw some research recently where, was it 7 minutes, where the average person kind of needs a new input. If you watch old movies, they had long extended scenes, and now it's like a machine gun with new impulses and new music, because
Yes.
obviously people's concentration levels aren't as high as they used to be.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard 7 seconds. So,
Wow.
um, think about like everything's short videos now with TikToks and Reels, and it's constant change. And that's not what our brain was built for. We need to take some breaks from it. And, rather than scrolling while you wait in the waiting room at the doctor's office, or if you're, just sitting around and you have a few moments, typically we would, before we had cell phones and all of these apps, we'd be at the coffee shop, we'd just be waiting in line. We'd look around, maybe we would talk to somebody. We'd have a moment of pause. So rather than scrolling while you wait, why don't you meditate while you wait? Take that powerful pause and use that moment to fit in your meditation, right? Like rather than thinking it has to be this extra thing that I add to my list of things to do, there's so many moments through the day. On the cover of Meditation for the Real World, there's a woman, she's sitting on a subway. She's on a train and she has her feet grounded down. She's sitting tall. Everybody around her is hunched over their cell phones. Even one guy has his laptop out, and they are all just in another world, scrolling. And she has some headphones on. Maybe she's listening to a relaxing song and being present. Maybe she's listening to a guided meditation and is very present. She's taking this time for her commute to meditate rather than it having to be, this extra 20 minutes you fit into your morning routine necessarily. Although that's great if you can do that. These 1 minute meditations at the waiting room of the doctor's office, that makes a huge difference. I used to pass out at the doctor's office, and now fitting in these little meditations helps me regulate.
We've spoken about your books. Do you offer retreats and seminars? Where can people reach out to you?
Well, I actually created an at-home retreat for you when you get Meditation for the Real World. So if you go to meditationfortherealworld.com, I have a gift for all your listeners, and that is audio meditations that have music and nature sounds in the background, which we should talk about the science of nature sounds in a moment. So it has music that has been engineered to optimize your brain waves for practice. And so if you go to meditationfortherealworld.com, you'll get those science-backed meditations to get you started with your practice. And you'll find out all the links to be able to get the book Meditation for the Real World.
Yes, let's talk about those nature
Yeah.
sounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a whole chapter in the book about the power of nature. So I was so excited to talk to you today because I know that that is your thing too. So we have different sounds in nature just naturally. There's this sound of rain falling. We all feel that so relaxing, right? The sound of rain falling, that's pink noise. And then there's the sound of the waves crashing in. I live right next to the ocean here in Hawaii, and I hear the waves constantly just crashing in. That's brown noise, or you can think of that also as like waterfalls. So if you haven't heard of like colors of noise, your world is about to be opened because you've heard of white noise. White noise is that sound, like the sound of a fan or this crackling of TV fuzz. And we often put that in the background to kind of block sound so that you can focus better. Now, pink noise and brown noise, they're some of my favorite types of noise because they induce that relaxation response. They help you to feel more at ease. When you hear the sound of the ocean or rainfall, you feel that ease, right? But we also, through studies, have shown that it helps with memory consolidation, focus, sleep. So if you could put that on in the background while you're sleeping, that's really beneficial for you. And I found that when I'm meditating, it helps me to focus better, helps me to get into that flow. And your brain doesn't necessarily know the difference when it hears nature sounds between you being in nature and just hearing the nature sounds. It's going to have that same healing effect. So we've even seen that with looking at pictures of nature. People get into that relaxed state from just looking at pictures or videos of nature. Of course, always better to go in nature when possible. But even if you're at work and you don't really have, a forest near you, you can go to small green spaces or blue spaces near you, like green spaces being like a very small patch of green and with some trees, a little park, or blue spaces just being a fountain, hearing the sound of the fountain, sit right next to the fountain and watch the water. That has been shown to have relaxing benefits for us. So getting these little tastes of nature, and then when you're in it, savor it.
Mm.
Really listen to the sounds of the birds. Pause. Take that powerful pause and do a 1 minute meditation. Take in your senses and just be.
That's such good advice because so many of us aren't that fortunate to be living out in nature and live in big cities where it's so difficult to reconnect with nature.
Yeah, even just, looking out your window at the tree moving in the wind and the clouds moving by when you're taking a break at work. Those little moments can make a big difference. When we stare at the screen, it's not so good for our eyes, nor is it good for our perspective. They've shown in research that the smaller the screen, like phones or a small computer screen versus a big one, the smaller and more narrow your perspective, and you can feel like kind of claustrophobic. So take some moments, look outside. Look away from screens. Let your eyes broaden, your vision broaden. Take it all in. That's what your brain is craving, not this like narrow focus all day. Um, and also, when we actually do go in nature, then we can get all five senses. So the sounds are wonderful. That's one of our senses, the audio, right? Um, but also the sights, as I said, you can look at videos, look out the window. That's wonderful too. When you go in nature, there's something called Japanese forest bathing, where they do walks in the forest. And researchers looked at these Japanese forest bathers, and they found, their natural killer cell count is really high. Now, this represents a part of your immune system that shows that you can fight tumors and cancer cells and invaders much better. And they're like, why? What's the reason why? Well, they believe it's because of the specific aerosols in the air, the smell of the forest that can help people reduce their inflammation and increase these natural killer cells, help their immune system. So also getting outside and taking some deep breaths and really smell it, really take in the sense of
Mm.
smell.
Yeah, fascinating subject. I could talk to you for hours, but our time is running out. So I'd really like to acknowledge you for your great work and for your great message. I'll post the show notes below so that people can connect with you and get those audio tapes. I think
Yes.
those must be great.
They are. And
And
also, I made an album of sounds that are engineered to optimize your brain waves, including all these sounds of nature. So definitely check that out. When you go to meditationfortherealworld.com, you'll get info on that too.
yes, it was great talking to you, Anne.
So great to
And
talk to
yeah.
you.